The night was electric with anticipation as the grand estate shimmered under the soft glow of twilight, a setting that promised joy, yet whispered secrets of foreboding. In the distance, the ornate marquee of the Morgan estate glowed warmly, its golden lights dancing on polished marble and the delicate shimmer of crystal chandeliers. Tonight was meant to be the celebration of love and union, a wedding bathed in both elegance and mystery. But beneath the surface of this resplendent affair, an unsettling tension simmered. At the center of this intricate tapestry of emotions was Billy, an enigmatic figure with a soul weighed down by a past filled with longing and sorrow. As the guests began to gather, adorned in shimmering silks and delicate lace, every detail of the evening was meticulously designed to evoke the beauty of romance. The soft murmur of conversations mingled with the gentle clinking of champagne glasses, creating a symphony of understated luxury. Yet, for Billy, each note of this performance resonated with an inexplicable discord, a reminder of dreams unfulfilled and promises broken. Standing alone near the entrance, Billy surveyed the scene with a gaze that belied the calm facade she was forced to present. Her eyes, deep and reflective, absorbed every nuance. The subtle interplay of warm amber and cool indigo in the lighting, the hushed whispers shared between strangers, and the fleeting expressions of hope and regret that crossed the faces of the elegantly dressed guests. Amid the radiance of polished marble and glittering crystal, an undercurrent of unease ran like a hidden current, tugging at the edges of her heart. The venue itself was a marvel of cinematic beauty. Imposing arches, cascading floral arrangements, and meticulously arranged tables set beneath an expansive starlit sky. The interplay of light and shadow was choreographed with precision. Brilliant beams of light broke through the stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscopic patterns upon the floor, while darker, more mysterious hues crept along the edges of every corner. It was as if the very fabric of the night was woven from threads of both brilliance and despair. Amid this visual spectacle, every minute detail, the swish of silk dresses, the tender glances exchanged between longtime lovers, even the crisp rustle of a wedding invitation, served as a silent narrator of the evening's unfolding drama. Yet, behind the elaborate decor and the festive cheer, Billy's mind was awash with inner turmoil. She had always been an observer, a quiet witness to the world's beauty and its brutal truths. Tonight, the splendor of her surroundings only heightened the stark contrast with the tumult within her soul. Memories of lost love, of hopes deferred, and of promises never kept churned like a restless storm behind her eyes. She recalled the days when love was pure, and the future stretched out like an endless horizon of possibility. Now, those dreams lay shattered in fragments of regret and yearning, leaving her to grapple with the bitter taste of what might have been. In that moment of reflective solitude, Billy's thoughts turned to Olivia, the radiant bride-to-be and her own flesh and blood, whose wedding was the very embodiment of a dream fulfilled. Olivia's joy, so effortlessly displayed in her every smile and every sparkling tear, was a poignant reminder of the life Billy had never been able to claim for herself. It was not merely a celebration of love, but a stark illustration of the choices fate had dealt her, a fate that seemed to conspire against the fulfillment of her heart's secret desires. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere grew increasingly charged. The gentle murmur of voices and the soft strains of classical music that floated through the air were punctuated by bursts of laughter and the clinking of toasts. Yet for Billy, the scene was tinted with melancholy. Each joyful exclamation from the guests only deepened her sense of isolation, a loneliness born not of the absence of company, but of the absence of understanding. Her inner conflict was a silent soliloquy, a meditative monologue in which her deepest fears and unspoken wishes clashed with the reality of her present. There was a part of her that longed to step forward into the light and embrace the possibility of new beginnings, yet another part that remained shackled by the ghost of a love lost and the heavy burden of unfulfilled promise. In the midst of the lavish celebration, the interplay of shadow and illumination took on a life of its own. The sumptuous drapery, The intricate patterns of light that played upon the marble floors, and the subtle reflections in the polished surfaces all worked together to create a setting that was both breathtaking and eerie. It was as if the very environment was alive, a silent witness to the interplay of human emotion and the inexorable march of destiny. For Billy, every glimmer and every subtle shift in the ambient glow was a reminder that beauty and pain were inexorably intertwined, two sides of the same shimmering coin. Her eyes wandered over the throng of elegantly dressed guests, noting with quiet resignation the trivial gestures of affection and the casual elegance that defined the night. There was a young couple in the far corner, their whispered confessions blending with the soft strains of a violin, and an elderly man whose weathered face lit up with a bittersweet smile as he recalled memories of a long-lost love. These small moments, so rich in human experience, stood in stark contrast to the tumult of emotions that roiled within her. For all the beauty that surrounded her, Billy felt as though she were caught in the midst of a grand narrative, a story that had begun long before this night and would continue to unfold in ways she could neither predict nor control. The camera of her mind panned slowly across the room, capturing the interplay of hope and despair etched on each face. The flickering candlelight revealed the delicate lines of worry on a mother's face, the spark of determination in a friend's eyes, and the soft, almost imperceptible signs of doubt that lurked beneath the smiles of those who had come to celebrate. It was a tableau vivant of life's most intimate moments, a living painting where every detail was a brushstroke of human emotion. And yet, amidst all this, Billy remained suspended in a state of inner conflict, a delicate balance between the lure of what could be and the harsh reality of what had already been. As the evening's festivities continued to swirl around her, like a mesmerizing dance of light and shadow, Billy's heart pounded with the quiet rhythm of a secret yearning. The memory of a love once cherished, a love that had left its indelible mark on her soul, persisted like an echo, haunting the corridors of her mind. In her heart, she knew that this wedding was not merely a celebration of new beginnings for others, but a turning point in her own life, a moment when fate would force her to confront the unresolved chapters of her past. Every flicker of a candle, every murmur of laughter, seemed to herald the possibility of transformation, even as the weight of her history threatened to hold her back. In the soft embrace of the fading evening light, as the cool night air began to mingle with the lingering warmth of the festivities, Billy found herself standing at a crossroads. The beauty of the night was undeniable, yet it was also a stage upon which the tragedy of unfulfilled desire was being played out in silent, heart-wrenching detail. Would she dare to step into the light and embrace the uncertain promise of the future, or would she remain trapped in the shadow of a past that refused to let go? This question, heavy with both hope and despair, loomed large in her mind. The scene was set, a celebration of life and love intertwined with an undercurrent of pain and mystery. As the guests began to settle into the rhythm of the evening, and the quiet murmur of conversation gave way to moments of introspection, Billy's thoughts turned to the inevitable moment when destiny would come knocking. There was an unspoken promise in the air, a subtle premonition that the night held secrets far deeper than the fleeting smiles and whispered toasts. It was a promise that Billy's fate was about to be irrevocably altered, that the boundaries between reality and the unknown would blur into a tapestry of possibilities. And so, as the golden hues of the setting sun yielded to the cool, somber tones of the night, Billy stood at the precipice of a new chapter, a chapter that would challenge everything she thought she knew about love, loss, and the unpredictable nature of destiny. The grandeur of the wedding, with all its luminous beauty and hidden sorrows, served as a mirror reflecting her innermost struggles. In that moment, her heart ached with both a longing for what once was and a tentative hope for what might yet be. The question remained: what would become of Billy on this fateful night? Would the echoes of her past lead her to a future filled with redemption and unexpected love? Or would they drag her deeper into the shadows of despair? As the first whispers of midnight approached, promising revelations and the stirring of long-dormant forces. Billy's eyes shimmered with a mix of determination and vulnerability. In the midst of celebration and chaos, her fate was poised on the edge of a blade, ready to tip the scales toward a destiny that none could predict. With a silent vow echoing in her soul, Billy took a hesitant step forward into the unknown, an invitation to a night where beauty, passion, and pain would collide in a cinematic dance of fate. Billy stepped away from the glowing warmth of the ballroom and into the cool, restless night boundary where the familiar world of celebration collided with the untamed wilderness beyond. As she walked along the edge of the manicured gardens, every step felt weighted by memories of past heartbreaks and lost chances. The twinkling fairy lights of the reception faded behind her, replaced by the whispering darkness of ancient trees and the gentle hum of nature reclaiming its territory. The air grew thicker, laden with the scent of damp earth and pine. In this space, the polished veneer of the wedding could not mask the raw, untethered pulse of life that stirred in the woods. Billy's mind began to drift to moments she had long tried to forget. The echoes of laughter that turned into tears, the promises that crumbled under the weight of reality, and the quiet moments when her heart had whispered of a love that could never be. As she moved deeper into the garden, the crisp sound of leaves rustling underfoot mingled with an inexplicable, almost musical murmur. A chorus of wind through the branches, punctuated by the distant call of an unknown creature. The forest, shrouded in shadows, beckoned with a promise of secrets and revelations. In that eerie half-light, the boundary between the world she knew and a realm ruled by instinct and raw emotion began to blur. Billy's pulse quickened. The stark contrast between the flawless, choreographed beauty of the wedding and the wild, unpredictable energy of the forest stirred something deep inside her, a reminder of a time when she had believed in magic, in the undeniable pull of fate. Each step she took on the gravel path felt like a descent into a hidden memory, a journey back to the moments when she first sensed that her life was intertwined with something beyond the mundane. Her thoughts swirled like the dark clouds overhead, memories colliding with the present. The soft murmur of Clay's laughter, the gentle touch of his hand that once promised a future full of love, and the cold realization that those moments had faded into bittersweet fragments of the past. The perfect wedding was a facade, a carefully constructed illusion that masked the pain of unfulfilled dreams and silent despair. And now, as she ventured into the natural darkness, those ghosts of memory crept back, intermingling with the unknown. In the midst of this internal tumult, a sudden, almost imperceptible shift in the ambience caught her attention. The air seemed to shimmer for a fleeting moment, as if infused with a spectral light that emanated from somewhere within the forest. A delicate, almost ethereal glow began to dance at the periphery of her vision, an interplay of soft blues and silvers, a visual echo of the moon that had not yet fully risen. It was as though the very fabric of reality was softening, letting in something primordial and ineffable. A low, resonant sound, a deep, melodic hum, wove itself into the natural chorus of the night. It was not the familiar music of the reception. It was something else entirely, something that vibrated with the heartbeat of the earth itself. The sound carried a strange familiarity, as if it were calling to a part of her soul that had been dormant for far too long. Then, without warning, the forest revealed its hidden guardian. Emerging from behind a curtain of swaying branches, the white wolf stepped into view once more, its majestic form outlined by the spectral glow that had just begun to fade. Every detail of the creature was etched in exquisite clarity. The soft, almost luminescent fur that rippled like a cascade of moonlight, the piercing eyes that held the wisdom of countless generations, and the graceful yet powerful movement that spoke of a natural royalty. Billy froze, her breath catching in her throat. The wolf's gaze locked with hers, and for an agonizing moment, time seemed to suspend. In those eyes, she perceived not merely the wild ferocity of nature, but an understanding that transcended words, a silent recognition of her innermost struggles, her unspoken desires, and the relentless sorrow that had clung to her heart. The creature's presence was both mesmerizing and menacing, a living embodiment of the forces that lay beyond human control. In that instant, Billy felt a stirring deep within, a primal awakening that blurred the lines between fear and fascination. The gentle luminescence of the wolf's eyes mirrored the glimmer of hope that had long been buried beneath layers of pain. It was as though the white wolf had become a conduit for the raw power of nature, a force that could either heal or devastate, depending on the course fate would take. The forest around her seemed to pulse with life. Every rustle, every whisper of the wind, carried the sound of ancient secrets. Shadows danced on the forest floor, playing across moss-covered stones and gnarled tree roots. The interplay of light and dark, of order and chaos, struck a chord within Billy's soul. In that surreal moment, she could sense that the boundary between the tangible world of glittering weddings and the elusive realm of wild instinct was dissolving. As she stood there, caught in the gravitational pull of this mystical encounter, Billy's inner turmoil began to settle into a tentative calm. The anguish of her unrequited love, the bitter memories of promises unfulfilled, and the quiet desperation that had haunted her for so long all seemed to coalesce into one profound question. Was her fate inexorably linked to this untamed force, to this white wolf who had stepped from the shadows of the forest? Could it be that the very elements of nature, in all their raw, untamable glory, had been waiting for her to awaken to her true self? Her mind raced with possibilities, of destiny, of magic, of a connection that defied the constraints of a world bound by societal expectations. The wedding, with all its glittering splendor and manufactured joy, had been nothing but a facade, a pale imitation of the vibrant, chaotic beauty that pulsed just beyond its borders. In the silence of the forest, Billy felt the call of something far greater than the trappings of an elegant ceremony. It was as if the forest itself was urging her to remember who she truly was, to embrace the wild, unrestrained part of her heart that had long been hidden away. The wolf took another step closer, its presence a silent command. The creature's eyes, reflecting the ephemeral glow of the forest light, seemed to ask, "Do you feel it too? The pull of a destiny written in the stars and the ancient earth?" Billy's heart pounded in response, a steady drum that resonated with the rhythm of the wilderness. The old wounds of the past, the regrets and longings that had dogged her steps since youth, began to fade into the background, replaced by an overwhelming sensation of inevitability. Every nerve in her body vibrated with the energy of the moment. She could almost feel the electric charge of nature itself, surging through her veins, a promise of change, of transformation, of an awakening that defied the limitations of her human life. The white wolf was not just an animal, it was a harbinger, a manifestation of the primal forces that had been gathering strength in the hidden corners of the world. For a long suspended moment, the silence between them was absolute. Billy's mind was awash with images of past sorrows and unspoken dreams, each one a thread in the intricate tapestry of her life. And yet, in the wolf's steady gaze, she sensed the possibility of renewal, a chance to break free from the chains of a destiny that had always seemed predetermined by loss and longing. In the cool darkness of the forest, under a sky fretted, with the first hints of approaching midnight, Billy found herself at a crossroads. On one path lay the well-trodden route of pain, regret, and the hollow comforts of a life dictated by expectation. On the other, there was a wild, uncertain trail leading into the heart of the unknown, a path where magic and destiny intertwined in an embrace that was both terrifying and exhilarating. The question lingered in the charged silence. Was she ready to step beyond the boundaries of her past and merge with a force that was as ancient as time itself? Could she, with all the scars and shadows of her history, find solace and perhaps even redemption in the wild call of nature? The image of the white wolf, regal and enigmatic, remained imprinted on her mind, a constant reminder that some things are meant to be claimed, that some destinies are written not in ink, but in the very essence of the living world. As the night deepened and the forest's song grew louder, Billy took a tentative step forward, her gaze never leaving the magnificent creature. The magic of the moment was palpable, a delicate thread of fate woven through the rustling leaves, and the soft, otherworldly glow that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the wilderness. Each step she took was a quiet defiance against the confines of a life that had always demanded she hide her true self behind a mask of decorum and resignation. The white wolf's eyes, fierce and tender all at once, promised that the wild was not something to be feared, but a part of her, a force waiting to be embraced. In that surreal juncture, Billy could no longer tell where the human world ended and the realm of instinct began. The memory of the flawless wedding, the laughter and applause, even the bittersweet pang of lost love, all of it melted into the overwhelming immediacy of the forest, where every sound and shadow spoke of ancient power and unspoken truths. And then, as if guided by an unseen hand, the wolf turned away, disappearing once more into the labyrinth of trees. Billy stood motionless, her heart pounding with a mixture of dread and anticipation. In that moment of absence, the forest seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for her to decide whether to follow this enigmatic guide into a destiny that defied logic and challenged everything she had ever known. A question formed on her lips, soft and trembling. "What is it that you want from me?" The night answered with a symphony of rustling leaves, distant howls, and the echo of her own heartbeat, a response that resonated deep within her soul, inviting her to step further into the merging of two worlds, the known and the untamed. Billy took one last deliberate look back at the glittering chaos of the reception in the distance, a life filled with beauty and deceit, and then turned back toward the darkened forest. Her journey had just begun, and with each step, the boundary between human fragility and the fierce, eternal wildness of nature grew ever thinner. Was this the beginning of a love reborn from the ashes of loss? Or was it the harbinger of a destiny that would forever change who she was? The forest held its secrets close, and as Billy moved deeper into its embrace, she could only wonder what fate had in store for her. The white wolf's silent invitation lingered in the air, a promise that somewhere in the depths of the night, her true self was waiting to be claimed. The stage was set, and the interplay of light and shadow, of memory and possibility hinted at the profound transformation that lay ahead, a transformation that would blur the lines between worlds and reshape the very fabric of Billy's existence. Billy's heart pounded as she stepped cautiously further into the moonlit clearing, every nerve alive with anticipation and dread. The forest, a realm of whispered secrets and rustling leaves, seemed to hold its breath as if awaiting the next chapter in an ancient, unwritten saga. Suddenly, from the depths of the darkened woods, the white wolf emerged again. A magnificent, almost otherworldly presence that seemed to command the very essence of nature. In that charged moment, time itself seemed to decelerate. Billy's eyes locked onto the wolf's, and the intensity of that gaze sent shivers cascading down her spine. The creature's eyes, luminous pools of silvery blue, flickered with an inexplicable mix of ferocity and tenderness, a silent language that spoke of forgotten legends and primordial power. For a heartbeat, Billy felt as though the wolf could peer directly into the recesses of her soul, reading every secret fear and every unspoken desire. The air around them vibrated with a surreal energy. Every small sound, the soft crunch of fallen leaves underfoot, the distant echo of a night bird's call, even the rustle of the wind through the ancient pines, melded into a symphony that underscored the gravity of the encounter. It was as if nature itself had orchestrated this fateful meeting, drawing Billy into an embrace of destiny that she had long tried to ignore. Her breath came in shallow, rapid bursts as she instinctively stepped backward, caught between the urge to flee and the magnetic pull of the wolf's presence. Fear and fascination warred within her, each vying for dominance. The memories of a life marked by pain and unfulfilled longing surged through her mind, only to be momentarily eclipsed by the raw, unadulterated allure of the beast before her. In that moment, she realized that this was no ordinary creature. It was the embodiment of the alpha, a symbol of untamed strength and irresistible magnetism. Billy's internal monologue roiled like a tempest. A part of her screamed to run, to escape the overwhelming intensity of this encounter. Yet, another, deeper part, an ancient fragment of her very being, whispered that this was a moment meant to be embraced. The wolf's silent invitation, expressed in the steady, rhythmic pulse of its gaze, beckoned her to let go of her reservations and surrender to the pull of destiny. As the wolf took another measured step forward, the clearing seemed to brighten ever so slightly. The pale light of the moon danced upon the wolf's pristine fur, sending delicate sparkles of silver cascading into the surrounding darkness. Each glimmer was a promise, a shimmering testament to the wild, untamed power that lay just beyond the edge of human comprehension. Billy could almost hear the ethereal chime of distant bells, each note harmonizing with the quickening beat of her heart. For a long, suspended moment, there was nothing but the profound silence of the forest and the unspoken exchange between them. The wolf, with its regal bearing and penetrating gaze, reached out with a slow, deliberate movement. Its muzzle lowered, as if to brush the air near Billy's cheek, a gesture that carried both the gentleness of a lover and the authority of a sovereign. The subtle contact was electric, igniting a spark that seemed to awaken something dormant deep within her. In that fleeting touch, Billy experienced a rush of sensations so vivid, it blurred the line between reality and dream. The sensation of cool, soft fur against her skin mingled with the warmth of a kindled flame. Her pulse roared in her ears, drowning out the myriad sounds of the forest as the wolf's breath, each measured exhale, filled the space between them with an almost tangible promise. It was a promise of transformation, of an unspoken pact, forged in the crucible of fate and desire. Within the depths of her mind, Billy's thoughts cascaded like a waterfall. She recalled fragments of long-forgotten dreams, the hopes of a life unburdened by sorrow, the possibility of a love that transcended the ordinary, a love that was fierce and pure. Now, as she faced the Alpha incarnate, those memories mingled with a new, exhilarating hope. She could feel the stirrings of an awakening, a resurgence of emotions that had lain dormant under layers of cynicism and despair. Yet, with this awakening came a cascade of conflicting feelings. The allure of the wolf was undeniable, its magnetic presence stirring a potent cocktail of desire, fear, and curiosity. Billy's heart ached with the memory of lost chances and lingering regrets, yet the intensity of the moment promised redemption, a chance to rewrite a destiny that had long seemed sealed in sorrow. Her mind reeled with questions. Who was this Alpha, this creature who embodied both danger and beauty? Was it merely an animal, or did it carry the echoes of a deeper, almost mythic connection? And most urgently, what did this fateful encounter mean for her? A solitary soul burdened with the weight of unspoken longing? As these thoughts swirled in her mind, the white wolf's eyes seemed to speak directly to her. There was a clarity in its gaze, a depth of understanding that transcended the boundaries of language. In that silent communion, Billy felt a subtle shift within herself, a quiet, insistent stirring that resonated with the very core of her being. The Alpha's presence was not just an external force. It was an echo of her own inner wildness, a reminder that beneath the veneer of human restraint lay a spirit as untamed and fierce as the wilderness itself. The sound of her own heartbeat, loud and insistent, filled her ears. Every thump was a drumbeat heralding change, a call to embrace the primal instincts that had always been a part of her. The forest around her seemed to pulse in time with her heart, as if the ancient trees and the soft murmur of the wind were all conspiring to urge her onward. Even as her mind grappled with the enormity of the moment, a part of her recognized that this was a turning point, a moment when the past, with all its pain and regret, could finally yield to a future filled with possibility. A soft, almost imperceptible shift occurred as the wolf stepped even closer, the distance between them shrinking until the space was charged with a magnetic intensity. In that delicate proximity, the wolf's eyes shimmered with a kaleidoscope of emotions, a spectrum that ranged from raw hunger to tender compassion, from fierce dominance to gentle reassurance. It was as if the creature had become the living embodiment of every desire and every fear that Billy had ever harbored. Then, in a breathless moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the wolf exhaled, a long, measured sigh that reverberated through the clearing. That single, soulful breath carried the weight of untold secrets, the echoes of ancient bonds, and the promise of an uncharted future. In that sound, soft yet powerful, Billy perceived a call, a summons to let go of the chains of her past and to step boldly into a realm where the wild, unyielding forces of nature and destiny could merge with her very soul. For a fleeting second, as the wolf's muzzle brushed against her cheek in a gesture that was both intimate and commanding, Billy felt as though her entire being was laid bare. Every guarded emotion, every silent tear of past disappointments was stripped away in that tender electric caress. The boundaries between self and other dissolved, replaced by a single, undeniable truth: that she was, at her core, a creature of the wild, destined to be entwined with forces that defied the mundane. In the heart of that magical encounter, Billy's inner turmoil transformed into something else. A stirring, almost imperceptible, of deep-seated longing and fierce determination. Her eyes, wide with a mixture of awe and burgeoning resolve, reflected the shimmering light of the wolf's gaze. In that reflective pool of shared destiny, she saw not just the face of an alpha, but the promise of a connection that transcended the physical, a bond forged in the crucible of instinct and ancient magic. The silence that followed was laden with meaning. The forest, too, seemed to pause, every rustle of leaves, every distant call of nocturnal life, falling into a hush, as if to honor the significance of what had just transpired. Billy stood there, suspended between worlds, as the undeniable force of the moment took root within her. It was as though a dormant part of her, long stifled by fear and resignation, had suddenly been awakened by the white wolf's unyielding presence. And then, as if the night itself had conspired to deliver one final, breathtaking revelation, a subtle change rippled through Billy's consciousness. Her breath caught, and for a moment, the world seemed to tilt. A sensation both disorienting and exhilarating. In that instant, she could feel a surge of raw, untamed energy coursing through her veins, as if the boundaries between her heart and the wild had finally begun to dissolve. Her instincts, buried deep beneath layers of caution and sorrow, stirred with an almost painful clarity. The alpha's eyes, still fixed on hers, now burned with a fiercer intensity, a look that spoke of unspoken promises and an inevitable destiny. It was in that gaze that Billy perceived the first true stirrings of something transformative, a recognition of a bond that had lain dormant, waiting for the precise moment to be awakened. With each passing second, the merging of their spirits grew stronger, a silent declaration that the forces of nature and fate had aligned to herald the beginning of a new chapter in her life. In the quiet aftermath of this extraordinary encounter, Billy's mind buzzed with conflicting emotions. The initial terror had given way to a fragile yet undeniable curiosity, an inner voice urging her to embrace this fateful convergence of destiny and desire. Questions raced through her mind about the nature of this alpha, about the profound magnetism that now pulsed between them, and about the uncharted path that lay ahead. Yet, amidst the swirling uncertainty, there was also a deep-seated certainty. that this moment was the catalyst for something monumental, a shift that would change the course of her life forever. As the white wolf slowly turned away, melting into the embrace of the dark forest once more, Billy's heart throbbed with a mixture of regret and hopeful yearning. In its retreat, the creature left behind an indelible mark, a silent promise that their encounter was not an isolated incident, but the beginning of an intricate, intertwined destiny. Billy stood rooted to the spot, her soul alight with newfound purpose and a quiet resolve that defied the lingering shadows of her past. In that poignant moment, as the nocturnal symphony of the forest resumed its gentle rhythm, Billy felt an unmistakable stirring deep within her, a primal call that resonated with every fiber of her being. It was the first sign that the dormant instincts, long suppressed by the weight of heartbreak and unspoken sorrow, were beginning to awaken. The spark of connection with the alpha had ignited something irrepressible, a promise of transformation and renewal that beckoned her to step into a future defined not by her past, but by the wild, uncharted possibilities of the present. With one final, lingering glance toward the shadowed path from which the white wolf had disappeared, Billy took a hesitant step forward. The night was no longer just a backdrop to the wedding's opulence. It had become a portal to a realm where destiny, desire, and raw emotion coalesced in a powerful symphony. In that defining moment, as her heartbeat quickened and the forest's secrets whispered around her, Billy realized that her life was on the cusp of an irrevocable change, a transformation that would challenge everything she had known and force her to confront the deepest truths of her soul. The fateful encounter had awakened her in ways she could scarcely comprehend, setting her on a path where every step promised both peril and the possibility of a love that transcended all boundaries. And so, with a quiet determination mingled with the tremors of newfound passion, Billy stepped deeper into the darkness, into the waiting embrace of destiny and the wild unknown, where the echo of the white wolf's presence would guide her every move. Billy's newfound awakening, stirred by the wild call of the white wolf, now found itself at the crossroads of love and lingering despair. As she journeyed back toward the edge of the estate, the luminous festivities of the wedding clashed violently with the dark undercurrents of her soul. Every step she took was weighed down by memories of lost love and the sharp sting of betrayal, a past that refused to be buried beneath the veneer of a perfect celebration. The gentle strains of a piano melody from the reception drifted into the night, a bittersweet reminder of the love that once promised solace and the heartache that had since followed. Yet, as Billy's inner world surged with conflicting emotions, the external world began to mirror that turmoil. In the grand foyer of the estate, where the opulence of polished marble and glittering chandeliers was meant to evoke joy, an unspoken tension simmered beneath the surface. At one corner of the room, Olivia, radiant, exuberant, and the embodiment of the ideal bride, exchanged soft, practiced smiles with guests. Her eyes sparkled, but behind the glitter lay hints of unresolved conflict, a silent testament to the pressures of a role she had never truly chosen for herself. Nearby, Clay, Billy's longtime friend and confidant, carried an air of both comfort and unease. His presence, usually a source of stability, now seemed charged with an undercurrent of something unspoken, an emotion that neither time nor distance could erase. Billy's heart pounded as she navigated through this labyrinth of familial bonds and unhealed wounds. In a quiet, secluded corridor, away from the clamor of celebration, she paused to catch her breath. The dim, flickering light of an antique chandelier cast wavering shadows along the walls, and in that transient darkness, the echoes of her inner conflict grew louder. It was here that she was forced to confront the brutal dichotomy within herself, the part that still harbored the tender warmth of love, and the part that was scarred by the cruel lessons of the past. Her mind raced back to a time when love had been uncomplicated, a memory now tainted by the bitter realization of what had been lost. She recalled moments of fierce passion, where promises were made in the soft glow of twilight, and whispered vows carried the promise of forever. Yet, Those same memories were now intermingled with the searing pain of betrayal, a past love that had crumbled into dust, leaving her spirit fragile and wary. In that quiet, desolate space, Billy's internal struggle reached its zenith. The conflict between her yearning for the wild, unbridled connection represented by the alpha and the cold logic of self-preservation began to erupt like a violent storm. Each heartbeat throbbed with the weight of this inner war, each thought a duel between desire and duty, between the ferocity of her instincts and the restraint demanded by her rational mind. As if summoned by the intensity of her emotions, a distant crash resounded through the corridors of the mansion. A sharp, startling sound that echoed like a prelude to chaos. Startled, Billy's eyes widened, and in that split second, the polished world around her fractured into shards of light and shadow. The echo of footsteps, heavy and determined, drew nearer. It was Clay, his face a mixture of concern and urgency, emerging from the depths of the corridor with a frown etched deeply on his features. "Billy," he said, his voice low and edged with worry. "What are you doing out here? You're missing all the important moments." His words, though gentle, cut through her reverie. Billy's eyes darted to him, the conflict inside her momentarily overshadowed by the external demands of familial duty. I just needed some air, Clay," she stammered, the admission sounding weak and unconvincing even to her own ears. Clay's gaze softened, yet there was an unmistakable intensity there, a silent plea for her to understand the turmoil that was consuming her. "You've been acting different tonight, Billy. I know something's wrong. Is it Olivia? Or something else?" His question hung in the air, fraught with implications and unspoken history. In that charged moment, the external conflict between the ideals of familial duty and the pull of her own heart clashed with brutal immediacy. Billy's eyes, glistening with unshed tears, betrayed the internal strife that had been festering within her. "It's everything," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's the wedding. It's all of it. I'm not sure who I am anymore." Before Clay could respond, a sudden commotion erupted from the main hall. A heated argument, voices raised in anger and frustration. The family, long burdened by secrets and old wounds, was now on the verge of an explosive confrontation. Olivia, radiant no longer but hardened by years of suppressed resentment, was in the midst of a fierce exchange with another relative. Accusations and old grievances spilled forth like venom, and the polished facade of the celebration began to crumble under the weight of raw, unfiltered emotion. Billy felt the pressure intensify as the sounds of discord reached her ears, a cacophony of shattered dreams and lingering regrets that mirrored her own internal battle. In that moment, she was caught between two worlds: the stable, expected role of a family member, and the wild, unpredictable surge of desire that called out to her from deep within. The dichotomy was stark, a collision of the tender remnants of love and the bitter specters of a painful past. Her mind, a turbulent sea of conflicting thoughts, could barely process the chaos unfolding around her. Every harsh word, every echo of a bygone conflict, stirred up memories of losses too painful to relive. The ache of a love that had once promised everything now felt like a ghostly chain, binding her to a fate she had long tried to escape. And yet, amid the clamor of external strife, there was an undeniable pull, a magnetic force that beckoned her to surrender to the wild, unrestrained part of her soul. In the distance, beyond the echoing voices of family discord, the soft murmur of nature provided a stark contrast. The rhythmic rustle of leaves and the distant call of an owl seemed to mock the superficial chaos of human conflict. They spoke of a timeless, primal order, a reminder that beneath the layers of societal expectation and painful memory, the core of one's being remained unyielding and free. As the heated conversation in the hall reached a fever pitch, Billy found herself drawn back to the image of the white wolf, the alpha, whose presence had ignited something fierce within her. In her mind's eye, the wolf's luminous gaze, so full of promise and wild intensity, merged with the fragments of her own heart. The memory of that encounter, so raw and unforgettable, flashed before her eyes like a beacon of both hope and danger. It was a moment when the boundary between fear and desire had dissolved, when every instinct had cried out in a symphony of primal longing. The internal battle raged on. Part of her longed to embrace that wild, unbridled passion, to let go of the shackles of past hurt and surrender to a love that was as fierce as it was liberating. But another part, scarred by betrayal and the cold logic of loss, clung desperately to caution, fearful of the devastation that such a surrender might bring. This dichotomy, this clash between love's raw potential and the bitter lessons of history, was tearing at her from within. The corridor around her seemed to pulse with the energy of the conflict. Shadows danced along the walls in erratic patterns, as if animated by the intensity of her inner strife. Every creak of the old floorboards, every distant thud of a heavy heart, amplified the overwhelming sense that the moment was fraught with peril. It was as though the very air vibrated with a promise of transformation, a promise that carried the risk of irrevocable change. Billy's thoughts spun wildly. What if I choose love? What if I embrace this wild, dangerous passion? She wondered, the questions echoing through the corridors of her mind like the refrain of an ancient, sorrowful ballad. Yet, the fear of repeating past mistakes, of being hurt, of losing herself in a maelstrom of emotion, held her back. The memories of love lost, of promises shattered by time and betrayal, surged forth with relentless force, threatening to drown the fragile hope that flickered within her. In that moment of raw vulnerability, the figures of her family and friends loomed large in her thoughts. Olivia, with her perfectly poised exterior hiding a turbulent past, represented the conventional path, a life bound by duty, expectation, and the painful constraints of what had always been. Clay, whose gentle yet conflicted presence had always been a silent anchor in her turbulent sea, now seemed to embody the safe harbor of familiarity and restraint. Their contrasting images clashed with the wild, inexplicable allure of the Alpha, force that promised both liberation and chaos. The tension reached a crescendo as the voices from the main hall crescendoed into a dissonant chorus. Billy felt as though she were standing on the edge of a precipice, with the chasm of her internal conflict yawning wide before her. Every fiber of her being screamed for resolution, a chance to reconcile the disparate parts of her heart that warred ceaselessly between passion and pain, and then, in a heartbeat that felt like an eternity, something shifted. Amid the tumult of clashing voices and the internal storm raging within her, Billy's senses sharpened. She could hear the distant echo of a heartbeat, steady and relentless, that seemed to merge with the soft primal rhythm of nature. In that singular transformative moment, her instincts surged forward, breaking through the paralyzing haze of doubt and fear. It was as if the long-dormant part of her, her wild, unrestrained self, had been awakened by the raw intensity of the present. Her eyes, wide with a mix of determination and uncertainty, flickered with a new light, a spark that bridged the gap between her guarded rationality and the fierce yearning that had always pulsed beneath the surface. Billy's internal battle, so deeply rooted in the scars of the past, began to give way to a singular, overwhelming impulse, the need to choose, to decide whether to continue living in the confines of familiar pain or to dare embrace the wild, unknown. In that decisive moment, every image of the white wolf, every memory of that fateful encounter, surged through her like a tidal wave. The Alpha had become more than just a symbol of raw power. It was a mirror reflecting her own suppressed desires, a beacon calling her to step into a future where love was as fierce and untamed as the wilderness itself. Yet the cost of such surrender was monumental. The risk of losing herself, of repeating the tragedies of the past, loomed large. As the echoes of family discord faded into the background, replaced by the soft cadence of the night and the whisper of the wind through Ancient trees, Billy stood at a crossroads. The path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, a labyrinth of wild passion and painful memory, of irrevocable choices and the promise of redemption. The question that now hung heavy in the air was as profound as it was simple. What would she choose? Would she succumb to the magnetic pull of the alpha, risking everything for a chance at a love that defied all convention? Or would she retreat into the safe confines of the past, forever haunted by what might have been? In that suspended moment of internal turmoil, the world seemed to hold its breath. The corridor, once filled with the distant sounds of celebration and conflict, now resonated with the soft murmur of fate's inexorable call. Billy's heart, wild and unyielding, beat with the promise of change, a promise that could shatter the chains of her past and forge a future born from raw, unbridled emotion. And so, standing on the precipice of a new beginning, Billy's soul trembled with both fear and anticipation. The choices laid before her were as stark and unyielding as the contrasting lights and shadows that danced around her. The internal battle between the tender remnants of a love once cherished and the daunting specter of past betrayals was at its most acute, challenging her to decide whether to remain imprisoned by her memories or to dare step forward into the wild, uncertain embrace of destiny. As the night deepened and the murmurs of distant voices faded into a quiet, persistent background, Billy's eyes shimmered with unshed tears and a flicker of resolve. The overwhelming question remained. In the midst of this fierce collision between love and loss, between wild passion and the pain of memory, which path would she choose? Billy's mind drifted back as she found herself alone beneath the sheltering canopy of ancient trees, the present moment dissolving into the hazy realm of memory. The cool night air, heavy with the scent of damp earth and pine, carried whispers of a past that refused to be forgotten, a past that had once shaped her into the conflicted soul she was today. In the muted glow of moonlight, Billy closed her eyes, and suddenly she was transported to a time when life had been filled with both promise and unspeakable pain. She remembered a small sunlit room where laughter once danced in the air, a home brimming with warmth and hope. Her mother's gentle smile and her father's reassuring embrace had once been the anchors in her young life. But those days, like so many fragile moments, had been shattered by forces far beyond her control. In the depths of that memory, the scene shifted to a bitter winter evening when Billy was barely a child. The house was cold and dim, the light from a single lamp flickering against the worn walls. Outside, a harsh wind howled like a mournful spirit, rattling the windows and echoing the turmoil within. It was on that night that tragedy first carved its mark upon her heart, a night when the fragile promise of love and security was torn apart by loss and betrayal. Billy recalled the sound of anguished cries, the cold shock of an unexpected farewell, and the overwhelming silence that followed. A silence so profound, it seemed to swallow every cry of despair. As the memory unfolded, Billy saw herself as a small, vulnerable figure, clinging to fragments of comfort amidst chaos. In that dark, uncertain moment, the faces of her parents blurred together in a swirl of sorrow. The gentle warmth of a loving embrace was replaced by the cold sting of abandonment. The hurt, seared into her very being, had planted the seeds of doubt and mistrust that would later bloom into an inner conflict between her yearning for love and the fear of reliving that same heartache. The recollection was not a single moment, but a cascade of images, flashes of a life once filled with innocent hope, now marred by the cruel hand of fate. Billy remembered the way the sunlight used to filter through the curtains, casting golden patterns on the wooden floor, a simple beauty that once made her feel safe. Now that same light seemed to mock her, a reminder of what had been lost and what could never be reclaimed. Each beam carried with it the echoes of laughter that had faded into silence, each shadow a reminder of the ghosts of regret that haunted her every step. In the midst of these memories, there was a recurring image. Quiet, solitary figure standing at the edge of a meadow as dusk settled in. That figure, a younger version of herself, had gazed into the distance with wide, questioning eyes, unaware of the heartbreak that awaited. It was a moment of pure, unguarded innocence, before the harsh truths of the world had etched themselves into her soul. Now, as she recalled that vision, Billy felt a profound sadness for the child she once was, a child who believed in endless possibilities and who had not yet known the bitter taste of loss. Time in those recollections seemed to stretch and warp, as if the fabric of reality had been suspended. Moments of overwhelming emotion lingered like echoes in a cavern, each one a vivid tableau of love and despair. In one such memory, she found herself at a family gathering, a celebration that had quickly turned into an arena of unspoken grievances and quiet resentment. The voices of her relatives, normally filled with light-hearted banter, were instead edged with bitterness and regret. The air was thick with tension, and the smiles that were forced onto faces betrayed the deep-seated sorrow simmering beneath the surface. Billy's heart pounded as she relived that painful scene. The conflicting emotions of longing for connection and the instinct to retreat into solitude collided violently within her. It was in these moments of raw vulnerability that the seeds of her inner conflict had been sown, seeds that had grown into an intricate web of emotions, binding her to the past, even as she struggled to forge a new path in the present. As her mind drifted between then and now, Billy could not help but notice the parallels between those long-ago memories and the present turmoil she now faced. The very hallmarks of her past, the echoes of a lost, once beautiful love, the fractures in her family's unity, the quiet sorrow that lingered behind every forced smile, were all mirrored in the tensions of the wedding she now attended. The grand celebration, with its dazzling lights and orchestrated elegance, stood in stark contrast to the ragged, unfinished notes of her inner symphony. Every tender moment shared by others, every joyous toast and heartfelt embrace, only deepened the wounds that had long festered within her. In the quiet solitude of the forest, the memories became almost tangible, a series of vignettes painted in hues of gold and shadow, interspersed with moments of piercing clarity. Billy could see herself, a solitary figure, walking through a rain-soaked street, her eyes cast downward as if in perpetual mourning. She remembered the cold drizzle that blurred the edges of the world, much like the tears that had once fallen unnoticed. Each droplet was a silent testament to the heartbreak that had defined her early years, a constant reminder that some losses were so profound, they changed the very fabric of who she was. There were also memories of fleeting moments of joy, brief interludes where hope had glimmered, despite the overwhelming darkness. She recalled a summer afternoon spent in a field of wildflowers, where the sun kissed her skin, and for a moment, the world seemed to promise endless possibilities. But even these bittersweet recollections were tainted by the awareness that such moments were fleeting, fragile instants that could vanish in the blink of an eye, leaving behind only the stark, unyielding truth of reality. As Billy sifted through these recollections, her emotions swirled into a maelstrom, a conflagration of love, loss, hope, and regret. The vivid imagery of her past merged seamlessly with the present, blurring the lines between what was and what could be. In that interplay of memory and reality, she began to understand the origin of her inner conflict. The scars of a childhood marred by abandonment and betrayal had festered into deep-seated mistrust, a fear of opening herself up to love again, of risking the fragile, delicate hope that still flickered within her. Yet, amidst the pain and the lingering shadows of sorrow, there was a dawning realization, a quiet epiphany that had taken root in the fertile soil of her memories. Billy recognized that every moment of heartbreak, every instance of pain, had shaped her into the resilient, introspective soul she was today. It was as if the very act of remembering had become a catalyst for transformation, a slow, deliberate process of shedding the old skin and embracing the possibility of renewal. The soft rustle of leaves, the gentle whisper of the wind through the branches, and the distant murmur of a night stream all served as a gentle reminder that life, in all its complexity, was a tapestry woven from both joy and sorrow. The past, with all its fragmented memories, was not just a repository of pain, but also a reservoir of strength. Every tear shed, every moment of despair, had carved out space within her for something new, a capacity to love fiercely, to forgive, and ultimately, to hope. In that reflective stillness, Billy felt the weight of her past begin to lift, replaced by a tentative clarity. She saw herself not as a victim of fate, but as a survivor, someone who had endured the harshest of storms, and yet had emerged with an unquenchable spark of life. The child who once wandered through rain-soaked streets, heart heavy with sorrow, had grown into a woman capable of profound empathy and boundless strength. The revelation was quiet, almost imperceptible at first, a subtle shift in the cadence of her heartbeat, a soft exhale that carried away a fraction of the old pain. It was the moment when the blurry, painful fragments of her past coalesced into a coherent narrative, a story of loss, yes, but also of resilience and renewal. Billy realized that the inner turmoil that had once seemed insurmountable was, in fact, the very crucible in which her true self had been forged. As she opened her eyes to the present, the boundary between then and now grew increasingly permeable. The echoes of past sorrows and the flickers of long-forgotten joy intermingled with the reality of the moment, creating a rich tapestry of emotion that was as complex as it was beautiful. Billy's heart, though scarred, now beat with a newfound determination, a resolve to face the future armed with the lessons of her past, no longer defined solely by the pain of what had been, but also by the promise of what could still be. Standing in that quiet, introspective space, Billy felt a sense of renewal swell within her, a glimmer of self-awareness that illuminated the darkest corners of her memory. She understood now that her inner conflict was not a weakness, but a profound testament to the depth of her capacity for love. The journey through her past, with all its bittersweet recollections, had not only scarred her, but had also imbued her with the strength to rise anew. And so, as the night wore on, and the forest's ancient song continued its gentle cadence, Billy made a silent vow to herself. The memories of her painful past, once a heavy burden, would now serve as a foundation upon which she could rebuild her future. In that moment of quiet revelation, she recognized that the path forward would not be easy. There would be more challenges, more heartache, and more moments when the old wounds threatened to reopen. Yet, armed with the clarity that comes from truly understanding one's own history, she was ready to embrace the unknown. With a heart now tempered by both sorrow and hope, Billy stepped away from the solitary refuge of her memories and into the unfolding tapestry of the present. The gentle interplay between past and present had left her with a newfound sense of purpose, a recognition that every scar told a story, and that story was one of survival, growth, and the endless possibility of love. In that profound silence, beneath the whispering trees and the gentle glow of the moon, Billy felt an undeniable shift, a quiet, resolute certainty that she was ready to forge a new path. The painful chapters of her past had not defined her. Rather, they had prepared her for the courage it would take to step into a future where she could choose love without fear, where she could embrace the wild, uncharted territory of her heart. And with that emerging clarity, Billy's soul stirred, with the promise of transformation, a promise that would soon guide her toward decisions that could alter the course of her destiny forever. Under the silver glow of a full moon, Billy found herself standing at the edge of a secluded glade, where the veil between the ordinary world and the realm of ancient magic seemed impossibly thin. The air was charged with a palpable energy, a silent symphony that resonated with the steady beating of her heart. In that hushed moment, Every fiber of her being pulsed with the quiet realization that her life was not merely a series of random events, but a tapestry woven with threads of fate, destined to intertwine with a force she had long sensed but never fully understood. It began with subtle hints. Over the past few nights, moments that at first appeared insignificant had gradually coalesced into something undeniable. The way the wind seemed to whisper her name, carrying a melody only she could decipher. The soft, almost imperceptible shift in the color of the night, as if the darkness itself blushed with secret intensity, and the recurring vision of a luminous figure moving through the shadows of her dreams. Each sign was like a delicate brushstroke on a vast canvas, slowly revealing the portrait of an unbreakable bond, one that stretched beyond the limits of time and space, connecting her to the enigmatic alpha. As Billy stood in that glade, her eyes drawn to the radiant beams filtering through ancient trees, she felt a stirring deep within her, a magnetic pull that seemed to draw her toward an unseen presence. Her pulse quickened, echoing the rising crescendo of a symphonic orchestra that only the heart could hear. In the stillness of that enchanted clearing, a soft, almost imperceptible sound began to weave through the silence, the rhythmic whisper of a distant heartbeat, harmonizing with her own. It was as if the universe had orchestrated this precise moment for her to awaken to her destiny. Then, from the shadows, emerged the figure of the Alpha, a presence both powerful and ethereal. He stepped forward with a quiet majesty, his form illuminated by a cascade of shimmering light that danced around him like spectral fireflies. His eyes, a deep, mesmerizing mix of stormy gray and crystalline blue, locked with hers in a gaze that seemed to pierce straight through the layers of her guarded soul. In that moment, Billy felt the air around her thicken, each breath laden with an unspoken promise that resonated with the ancient cadence of destiny. The Alpha's presence was not a sudden intrusion, but rather a culmination of subtle signs that had long woven their way into Billy's life. Every time she had glimpsed his image, in reflections of glass, in the gentle shimmer of a rain-soaked window, or even in the quiet corners of her dreams, she had felt an inexplicable connection, a sense of recognition that went beyond the mere physical. Now, facing him directly, the bond that had been dormant within her burst forth like a long-awaited dawn. It was as if every whispered secret of the past, every sorrow and every hope, had been preparing her for this singular, breathtaking encounter. For a long suspended moment, the world around them seemed to fade away. The distant sounds of the wedding festivities, the murmurs of her family, and even the rustle of the wind among the leaves, all dissolved into a soft, otherworldly hum that underscored the magnitude of the moment. Billy's eyes, wide with wonder and vulnerability, reflected the shifting interplay of light and shadow in the Alpha's gaze. In his eyes, she saw not just a stranger, but a mirror of her own hidden depths, a promise of a connection that was as ancient as the stars themselves. The subtle interplay of sound and light intensified as the Alpha took a step closer. A soft radiance enveloped them both, casting a glow that transformed the ordinary into something transcendent. The delicate shimmer of his presence illuminated the space between them, revealing intricate patterns in the air, a tapestry of light that pulsed in time with Billy's racing heart. It was as if the very universe had conspired to mark this moment with an ethereal beauty, a visual sonnet composed of vibrant hues and whispered secrets. In that luminous silence, the Alpha's voice broke through, a low, resonant timbre that seemed to reverberate from the depths of time. His words, measured and imbued with an almost sacred gravity, carried the weight of ancient wisdom. "Billy," he said, his voice a melodic blend of power and tenderness. "Do you feel it? The bond that defies all reason, binding us beyond the confines of this mortal existence?" The question hung in the air, resonating within her like a bell tolling in a vast, empty cathedral. Billy's mind raced, caught in the whirlwind of emotions that surged forth. She had always felt an inexplicable pull, a yearning that defied logic, a desire that pulsed with the rhythm of the wild. Now, as the Alpha's words mingled with the soft music of the night, everything converged into a single, undeniable truth. Their souls were intertwined, fated to dance together through the tapestry of life and time. Her thoughts swirled with the recollection of every small sign that had led her to this moment. The inexplicable coincidences, the lingering glances in the mirror, the nights when her dreams were haunted by a vision of a man cloaked in starlight. Each memory, once dismissed as a mere trick of the mind, now revealed itself as a deliberate nudge from destiny. The Alpha's eyes softened, a tender warmth melting through the intensity of their connection. "I have searched for you across lifetimes, Billy," he continued, his voice imbued with an ancient, almost mythic sorrow and hope. "In every whisper of the wind, in every echo of a forgotten promise, you were there, an unyielding beacon, in the darkness. And now, here we stand, as destiny unfolds before us." His words, laden with emotion, stirred something deep within her, a resonance that transcended the boundaries of words and transcended the realm of the tangible. Billy's heart trembled as she absorbed his confession, her inner world ablaze, with the mingling of joy, fear, and a profound sense of belonging. The Alpha's declaration, echoing through the magical glade, awakened an intensity in her that she had long tried to suppress. In that instant, the weight of her past, every heartbreak, every silent tear, melted into insignificance, replaced by the raw, exhilarating promise of a future defined by a love that was as boundless as it was inevitable. The Alpha extended, his hand, a silent invitation that spoke of unity and the merging of two souls destined to be one. The space between them shimmered with an almost tangible energy, a bridge woven from the threads of fate and desire. Billy hesitated for a heartbeat. Pause filled with the uncertainty of the unknown, before her own hand, trembling yet resolute, met his. The contact was electric, a surge of warmth and light that cascaded through her, igniting every dormant corner of her being. In that sacred union of touch, she felt an overwhelming rush of images, fleeting memories of long-forgotten joys, the echo of ancient promises, and the quiet, persistent pulse of a love that had always been waiting to be awakened. As their hands intertwined, the glade seemed to transform. The interplay of moonlight and shadow shifted. The colors around them deepened, and an otherworldly glow bathed the clearing in a surreal radiance. The rustling of leaves, the soft murmur of the wind, and the gentle cadence of their synchronized heartbeats composed a symphony that was both intimate and cosmic. In that moment, Billy's senses were overwhelmed by a clarity that was almost divine, a vision of a future where the past and the present merged seamlessly, guided by the unyielding force of destiny. Her eyes met his once again, and in that profound gaze, Billy saw reflected the myriad facets of her own soul, the resilience born of hardship, the quiet hope nurtured in the silence of despair, and the fierce, untamed longing that now blazed, like a beacon. It was as if the Alpha had reached into the depths of her heart and kindled a flame that had long been smothered by the ashes of regret. With every heartbeat, the bond between them solidified, a luminous testament to the power of fate and the inexorable pull of true connection. In that sacred space, time itself seemed to suspend, a fleeting eternity where nothing existed except the profound intimacy of their shared destiny. The Alpha's voice, soft, yet imbued with an undeniable authority, broke the silence once more. "This is only the beginning, Billy. The bond we share is a gateway, a passage that will lead us to a new horizon where our past sorrows will give way to a future of endless possibilities. Trust in this connection, and let it guide you to where you truly belong." Billy's heart swelled with a mix of wonder and trepidation. She felt as though she were standing at the threshold of a new existence, a life where every heartbeat was a promise and every breath a step toward redemption. The luminous energy that enveloped them shimmered like a beacon, urging her to embrace the destiny that had always been etched in the fabric of her soul. In that charged moment, she realized that her connection with the Alpha was not merely a fleeting encounter. It was the culmination of every small, significant moment that had led her to this singular point in time. The symphony of light, color, and sound swirled around them, each element amplifying the intensity of the bond they now shared. The gentle rustle of the leaves, the soft murmur of the stream in the distance, and the harmonious cadence of their intertwined heartbeats all merged into a chorus that celebrated the power of destiny. It was a sound that transcended the ordinary, a timeless melody that echoed the promise of a future where the scars of the past could finally heal, replaced by the luminous glow of a love reborn. As the night deepened, the mystical energy of the glade seemed to whisper secrets of an ancient world, a world where destiny was not a matter of chance, but a force that guided every living soul toward its true purpose. Billy's eyes, shimmering with unshed tears and fierce determination, held the quiet acknowledgement of that truth. She understood now that her journey was irrevocably tied to the Alphas, that their fates were intertwined by an invisible thread that had been spun long before she ever knew love or loss. With a final lingering look at the celestial dance of light and shadow that framed their union, Billy felt the bond surge within her, a promise that the path ahead would lead her to a place where the echoes of her past and the promise of her future would merge in perfect harmony. This was not the end of her struggle, but the beginning of a new chapter, a journey into the uncharted territory where destiny and desire converged, forever altering the course of her life. And so, as the first whispers of dawn began to tint the horizon with gentle hues of pink and gold, Billy took a determined step forward, guided by the radiant bond that now connected her to the Alpha. In that transformative moment, as the light of a new day began to break through the remnants of night, the promise of a fated connection shone clear, a beacon that would lead her into a future where the past and the present coexisted in a tapestry of hope, healing, and infinite possibility. Under the canopy of a starlit sky, the glade transformed into a realm of raw emotion and tender vulnerability. Billy and the Alpha, his presence a blend of rugged strength and enigmatic allure, found themselves drawn together in a gravitational pull that defied explanation. Every heartbeat, every subtle shift of light, seemed to herald the evolution of a love that was as dangerous as it was irresistible. In the soft luminescence of moonlight, the Alpha reached out, his eyes alight with a fire that mirrored the intensity burning within Billy. Their gazes met, and for a moment, time itself stilled. It was as if the universe had conspired to etch this encounter into eternity. Every particle of air vibrated with the unspoken promise of a bond forged in the depths of destiny. Billy's pulse quickened. The air around them thrummed with a symphony of whispered secrets and gentle yet insistent rhythms of passion. "Billy," he murmured, his voice low and resonant, carrying the weight of ancient longing. "Do you feel it? The pull that defies logic, that binds us beyond what words can convey?" His tone was both tender and commanding, as though he were not merely asking a question, but offering a glimpse into a shared destiny. Billy's heart fluttered as she struggled to articulate the storm of emotions within her. I feel it," she managed, her voice trembling with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "It's like every moment, every breath, is leading me right here, to you." Her words, soft and tentative, were interlaced with the undeniable tremor of vulnerability that came from baring one soul to another. As they spoke, the glade around them began to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The silvered leaves shimmered with fleeting hues of gold and violet, while the distant murmur of a babbling brook merged with the rhythmic cadence of their heartbeats. In that enchanted space, every element seemed to dance in unison with their burgeoning connection. The very air was alive with the soft, persistent thrum of possibility, a promise that the delicate threads of fate were weaving their lives together in ways that transcended mortal understanding. Their conversation flowed, like a gentle stream, interspersed with moments of profound silence that spoke volumes. The alpha's eyes, deep and magnetic, revealed an inner world, rich with both sorrow and hope. "I have wandered through countless nights, searching for this moment," he confessed, his gaze unwavering. "In the quiet recesses of my heart, I have known that our souls were intertwined long before this very moment. Yet, I also carry the scars of a past that haunts me, the fear of losing something so precious, of being consumed by the very passion that defines us." Billy's own thoughts swirled like autumn leaves caught in a gust of wind. The tenderness in his words struck a resonant chord within her, echoing memories of lost love and dreams that had once soared high but were dashed upon the jagged rocks of reality. "I too have known that kind of pain," she whispered, her voice laden with the weight of unspoken memories. "There are nights when I lie awake, haunted by what could have been, terrified of embracing a love that might shatter me." Her confession was raw, a glimpse into a soul weathered by past betrayals and the sting of unfulfilled longing. In that delicate interplay of vulnerability and desire, the alpha stepped closer. The distance between them evaporated, leaving only the electric tension that pulsed like a living current. His hand, calloused and gentle, reached for hers. Their skin met, a contact that was both electric and soothing, igniting a cascade of sensations that coursed through Billy's veins. The soft pressure of his touch, the warmth of his skin, and the undeniable pull of his presence, all melded into a singular, overwhelming moment of intimacy. The sounds of the night grew louder around them, the soft whisper of the wind, the rustle of leaves beneath unseen paws, and the gentle rhythm of their entwined heartbeats. Each sound was a note in a symphony that celebrated the raw power of their union. In that fleeting moment, Billy's mind was awash with images of shared futures, of dawns breaking with the promise of renewal, and nights filled with whispered dreams and unspoken truths. Yet, amid the surge of passion, a darker current ran beneath, her rising joy. The alpha's words echoed in her mind, a reminder of the precarious balance between love and loss, the fear of being consumed by an intensity so overwhelming, of surrendering completely only to face the bitter sting of inevitable heartbreak gnawed at the edges of her newfound ecstasy. The memory of past wounds, of love lost and trust betrayed, hovered like a specter at the periphery of her consciousness. "Billy," the alpha said softly, his voice imbued with both tenderness and an underlying urgency. "Our hearts are bound by more than passion. They are intertwined by fate, by the echoes of every moment that led us here. But I know the fear that lingers within you. I know the scars of your past that make you hesitate, that make you wonder if this is a path of salvation or destruction." Her eyes shone with unshed tears, reflecting the soft, trembling light of the moon. "I'm afraid," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm terrified that this love might be as dangerous as it is beautiful, that if I let go completely I might lose myself, or worse, lose you." Her words were a confession of her innermost conflict, a battle between the yearning to embrace the wild, unbridled connection and the instinct to protect her fragile heart from the inevitable pain. The alpha's gaze softened, and he gently squeezed her hand, as if to impart strength through the warmth of his touch. "I understand, Billy," he murmured, his tone a soothing balm to her wounded spirit. "I too have danced on the edge of that precipice where the ecstasy of love meets the agony of loss. But know this, every moment of fear is a testament to the depth of what we share. It is the price we pay for a love that burns brighter than the stars." Their dialogue, a delicate ballet of admission and reassurance, wove a tapestry of raw emotion that enveloped them both. With every word, the alpha peeled back the layers of uncertainty, laying bare the essence of his soul. a soul that had long been searching for a counterpart as fierce and tender as hers. "Let us not be prisoners of our past," he urged softly. "Let us instead dare to dream of a future where the wounds we bear become the source of our strength, where the beauty of our love defies the shadows that haunt us." As his words washed over her, Billy felt the intensity of their connection intensify, like a fire stoked by the winds of fate. The Alpha's eyes, luminous and steadfast, mirrored the depths of her own longing, a reflection of every silent plea, every buried hope that had defined her life. In that charged moment, the space between them seemed to dissolve, leaving only the electric pulse of their shared destiny. Yet, even as the tender heat of their union warmed her heart, the specter of internal conflict loomed large. The desire to surrender completely, to let the torrent of love carry her to a place of unbridled ecstasy, was tempered by a lingering, insidious fear of loss. Each beat of her heart was a battle cry, echoing the duality of her existence. The promise of a love so intense it could heal all wounds, and the terror that such intensity might also shatter her completely. The night deepened, and the magical glow of the glade grew ever more radiant, as if the very cosmos were bearing witness to their fated encounter. The Alpha pulled her gently into a close embrace, their foreheads resting together as if in a silent vow. In that intimate closeness, Billy's senses were overwhelmed by the soft murmur of his breath and the quiet rhythm of his heartbeat, a cadence that seemed to whisper of a future where both love and loss were inextricably bound. "Will you trust me, Billy?" he asked, his voice low and laden with both promise and the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths. "Will you let our hearts intertwine, despite the fear that lingers, and dare to walk this path with me?" His question, simple yet profound, reverberated through the stillness of the night, stirring a deep, primal response within her. For a long moment, the only sound was the beating of their hearts, a steady, relentless drum that pulsed with the certainty of destiny. In that silence, Billy felt herself standing on the threshold of two worlds, one defined by the familiar ache of loss and guarded solitude, and another illuminated by the possibility of a love so fierce it could transform everything. The choice was agonizing yet inevitable, a decision that would shape the contours of her soul for all time. Tears glistened in her eyes as she met his gaze, her voice trembling with a mix of sorrow and resolve. "I do," she whispered, barely audible over the symphony of the night. "I want to believe that our love can be a refuge, a light in the darkness that has haunted me for so long. But I'm scared. I'm scared of losing myself in this fire, of surrendering completely, and then facing the pain of inevitable loss." Her confession was raw, an outpouring of every shattered hope and fragile dream that had ever taken root in her heart. The Alpha's expression softened, and he stroked her cheek with a tenderness that belied the strength of his resolve. "I promise you, Billy, that every moment of fear, every doubt we face, will only make our bond stronger. Our love is not a reckless flame meant to consume, but a guiding light that will help us navigate the darkest of nights." His words, imbued with both compassion and unwavering certainty, offered a glimpse of hope, a promise that even amidst the chaos of internal strife, there was a future worth embracing. In that breathtaking moment, the glade seemed to vibrate, with the echoes of their shared desire and quiet determination. The interplay of light and shadow, the soft cadence of their whispered promises, and the tender warmth of their embrace all coalesced into a singular, transformative experience. Every subtle gesture, the gentle squeeze of a hand, the lingering brush of lips near the skin, the rhythmic dappled patterns of moonlight on their intertwined forms, spoke of a connection that transcended the physical, reaching deep into the realms of the heart and soul. Yet, as the intimacy of their union deepened, the ever-present specter of internal conflict remained. Billy's heart, now a battleground of fierce love and gnawing apprehension, pulsed with the painful awareness of what it meant to open oneself so completely. The fear of loss was not easily vanquished, It was etched into her very being, a legacy of every heartbreak and betrayal that had ever scarred her. And so, amid the soaring passion and the tender vulnerability, there lingered a question. A lingering, agonizing uncertainty about the true cost of surrender. The night's symphony reached a crescendo as the Alpha pulled her closer, his voice, a soft murmur in her ear. "Our destiny is written in the stars, Billy," he whispered, his tone both an affirmation and a plea. "Together, we can rise above the shadows of our past. We can embrace a love that is as wild and unyielding as the night itself. But it requires courage, a leap of faith into the unknown." His words were both a benediction and a challenge. A call to cast aside the shackles of fear and embrace the incandescent potential of their union. Tears streamed silently down Billy's face as she allowed the magnitude of the moment to wash over her. The raw, unfiltered intensity of their love, the mingling of desire and despair, and the quiet, persistent pulse of hope all coexisted in a delicate balance that was as exhilarating as it was terrifying. In that pivotal moment, Billy knew that she stood at the crossroads of two divergent paths, one that promised a life of safe, measured routine, and another that beckoned with the allure of wild, transformative passion. As the first light of dawn began to edge its way over the horizon, the magical glow of the glade dimmed slightly, yet the fire within them burned ever brighter. Their embrace, so deeply felt and profoundly real, held the promise of a future where every heartbeat was a testament to the strength of their love and the courage to overcome the pain of the past. And though the specter of uncertainty lingered, it was now interwoven with the luminous thread of hope, a thread that would guide them forward into an uncharted future. In that tender yet tumultuous interlude, as the Alpha's warm hand caressed, her cheek and the soft murmur of the night slowly gave way to the promise of a new day, Billy felt an irrevocable shift. The barriers that had long separated her from the wild depths of passion began to crumble, replaced by the dawning awareness that her heart was ready to embrace a love that transcended all fear. And as the night's final vestiges melted into the light of day, a single profound truth resonated within her. The choice was hers, and hers alone. Would she dare to follow the call of the Alpha? To venture into a realm where love was a wild, transformative force? Or would she retreat into the safety of the familiar, forever haunted by the ghosts of her past? The answer, though not yet fully formed, shimmered in the early light. A beacon of possibility that promised both pain and ecstasy in equal measure. With the rising sun casting a soft, hopeful glow upon the glade, Billy's heart trembled with anticipation and resolve. In that open, fragile moment, the future lay before her. Uncertain, daunting, yet brimming with the promise of a love that could heal all wounds. And as the day broke gently over the horizon, their intertwined hearts beat as one, whispering of a destiny that was just beginning to unfold. The chapter of their union had reached its emotional climax, a moment suspended between fear and the irresistible pull of desire. And in that charged silence, with the promise of endless possibilities shimmering on the cusp of dawn, Billy stood ready to take the leap, a leap that would forever alter the course of her life and merge the realms of past and present in the dazzling light of a new beginning. The atmosphere inside the grand estate had shifted from elegant celebration to a cauldron of tension, as if an unseen force had thrown open the floodgates of long-suppressed emotions. Outside, the wind howled through the ancient trees, carrying with it whispers of fate and a promise of reckoning. Inside, voices clashed like thunder, and the once harmonious music of the reception was drowned out by heated arguments and stifled cries. At the epicenter of this storm stood Billy, her eyes wide with a tumult of inner conflict as the weight of her destiny pressed down on her like an avalanche. It began in the opulent drawing room, where the polished marble and glistening chandeliers now reflected not joy, but discord. Family members, long embroiled in silent grudges and unspoken resentments, had emerged to challenge the carefully maintained Facade of the wedding. Olivia, the radiant bride whose smile once seemed effortless, now bore an expression etched with anger and betrayal. Clay, Billy's steadfast friend, looked torn between loyalty to his family and his own conflicted feelings, his gaze shifting uneasily as he attempted to mediate the rising tensions. Amid the cacophony of heated words and clashing ideologies, the undeniable force of destiny made its presence known. From the depths of the tumultuous crowd, the Alpha, mighty, enigmatic, and inexorably magnetic, stepped forward, his eyes blazing with an intensity that silenced the room momentarily. He advanced with the assured grace of someone who knew that his arrival was not accidental, but predestined, as if the very fabric of fate had conspired to bring him here, at this exact moment, to claim what was his. Enough. His voice, resonant and powerful, cut through the din like a clarion call. For a brief, suspended moment, all eyes turned to him. The air seemed to vibrate with the electricity of his presence, and even the dissonant murmurs of the family fell into a heavy silence. "Billy," he declared, his tone both tender and commanding, "it is time to confront the truth that has been hidden for far too long." Billy's heart thundered in her chest as she met his unwavering gaze. In that moment, she could feel the alpha energy radiating from him, an energy that promised both protection and peril. Yet, the intensity of his declaration stirred a fierce, undeniable longing within her, a desire to embrace the wild, untamed destiny that beckoned. At the same time, an inner voice whispered of caution, a reminder of all that had been lost, and the pain of surrender that had scarred her heart. From the far side of the room, Olivia's voice, sharp with indignation, broke the silence. "Who do you think you are?" she demanded, stepping forward, her eyes narrowing with a mix of fury and hurt. "You have no right to intrude on our family's celebration with your twisted fantasies of destiny." Her words, laced with bitterness, reverberated off the marble walls, igniting fresh sparks of discord among the onlookers. Clay, standing between the warring voices, attempted to interject. "Olivia, please. This isn't the time for personal attacks. We're all hurting here, and we need to listen." But his plea was lost amid the rising storm of emotions. The Alpha's jaw tightened, his gaze never faltering from Billy's. "This isn't about fantasy, Olivia," he replied coolly, his voice resonating with a power that left no room for argument. "It is about truth. Billy, you know in your heart that we are bound by something ancient, something that cannot be denied by mere words or societal expectations." His declaration, delivered with an intensity that made the very air tremble, sent ripples of shock through the assembled family. Billy's mind churned with conflicting emotions. Every instinct within her screamed to reject this overwhelming intrusion, a claim on her heart that threatened to unmoor her from the only life she had known. Yet, at the same time, a deep, primal part of her recognized the truth in his words, the undeniable pull that had drawn her toward him since that fateful night in the glade. She could almost see the memories flickering behind his eyes. Moments of shared vulnerability, of a connection so profound, it seemed to transcend the boundaries of human experience. Caught in this maelstrom of love and defiance, Billy felt the internal conflict intensify. Her past, the echoes of heartbreak, the scars of betrayal, and the silent grief of lost love raged inside her, a tempest that threatened to overwhelm the tender promise of a new beginning. I don't know if I can," she whispered, her voice trembling as she tried to articulate the depths of her inner torment. "I'm afraid of losing myself, of being consumed by something I can't control." Her confession, raw and desperate, hung in the air like a fragile plea for understanding. The Alpha's eyes softened, and for a heartbeat, his fierce exterior gave way to a tenderness that belied his formidable presence. "Billy," he said gently, taking a step closer so that only the two of them remained at the center of this charged moment. "I understand your fear. I carry my own burdens, scars that tell the story of a love both lost and found. But this is not a curse. It is our destiny. Every fiber of my being has searched for you, and in your eyes, I see a reflection of the strength and beauty that lies within. The tension in the room escalated, a tangible clash between the forces of tradition and the wild, uncharted promise of fate. Family members exchanged anxious glances, torn between their ingrained skepticism and the magnetic pull of the Alpha's conviction. The air crackled with a mixture of anticipation and dread as Billy's inner turmoil reached its zenith. She felt as though she were standing on a razor's edge, a precipice where the delicate balance between love and loss, between acceptance and defiance, was about to tip irrevocably. In that moment, the Alpha advanced, his presence overwhelming, as if he intended to erase the doubts that had plagued her. His hand reached out, not in aggression, but in a gesture of claiming, a silent declaration that their souls were irrevocably intertwined. "Let me show you," he murmured, voice low and fervent, "that the love we share is not a threat, but a sanctuary. Trust me, Billy, and together we will defy the pain of the past." As his hand brushed against hers, the contact sent a jolt of energy surging through her body. In that electrifying touch, Billy felt a cascade of sensations, flashes of tender memories intertwined with the promise of an uncharted future. It was as if the Alpha's touch had the power to unlock every guarded corner of her heart, flooding her with images of what might be. A future where the wounds of the past healed under the warmth of a love reborn. For a moment, the world around them seemed to fade into insignificance. The heated voices, the flickering candlelight, and even the distant strains of discord all melted away, leaving only the pulsating rhythm of their hearts, beating as one in the silent symphony of destiny. In that sacred silence, Billy found herself teetering on the brink of a life-altering decision, a choice between clinging to the familiar pain of her past and embracing a future lit by the fierce, transformative flame of love. Her mind raced, with questions. What would it mean to surrender so completely to this force? Could she truly allow herself to be claimed by a destiny so potent, so utterly consuming? The fear of losing herself, of being swallowed whole by the tide of overwhelming passion, was countered by the undeniable allure of a connection that promised to mend the deepest parts of her soul. It was a paradox that left her both terrified and exhilarated. Across the room, the murmurs of discontent among the family grew louder, a cacophony of voices steeped in tradition and defiance. Olivia's eyes, burning with a mixture of anger and heartbreak, fixed on Billy with a look that challenged her every thought. "You must be out of your mind if you believe in such fairy tales," Olivia spat, her voice rising in disbelief. "This isn't some myth. This is our life, and you cannot let these delusions dictate your future." The clash of ideologies, the battle between the safe confines of societal expectations and the wild, unpredictable pull of destiny, reached a fever pitch. Billy felt the weight of these conflicting forces pressing down upon her, each one tugging at her with equal intensity. In that fraught moment, as the Alpha's quiet assertion of fate battled against the rigid constraints of family and past trauma, Billy was forced to confront the stark reality of her choice. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked between the unwavering gaze of the Alpha and the disapproving stares of her family. Every fiber of her being trembled with the enormity of the decision before her, a decision that would not only define her own fate, but also reshape the intricate tapestry of relationships around her. The Alpha's voice, soft yet imbued with an undeniable authority, cut through the tumult of her thoughts. "Billy, your heart is the key. Only you can choose the path forward. I am here, but the journey must be yours to claim." The words hung in the air like a delicate promise, a promise that the power to forge her destiny lay within her own trembling hands. The Alpha's declaration, his gentle yet insistent touch, and the unyielding pull of the familial voices all converged into one pivotal, breathtaking moment. It was a moment when every heartbeat, Every breath, every tear shed in the solitude of her struggle crystallized into a single, irrevocable truth. The time for indecision was over. In the charged silence that followed, Billy's inner voice, long, muffled by fear and sorrow, rose in a crescendo of desperate hope and quiet resolve. The turbulent emotions that had defined her life, the longing, the pain, the fear of loss, swirled together in a storm of possibility. And as she stood there, suspended between the expectations of her past and the promise of a future replete with the wild, unbridled power of destiny, she knew that a choice had to be made. The crescendo of familial conflict, the raw intensity of her inner turmoil, and the piercing declaration of the Alpha's claim culminated in a moment that felt both eternal and fleeting. In that instant, as the echoes of shattered voices and the rhythm of their entwined heartbeats filled the space, Billy's soul reached a tipping point. The decision she made in that moment would alter everything: her life, her relationships, and the very essence of her being. As the room held its breath, the Alpha's eyes locked with hers one last time, a silent command and a tender plea intermingling in their depths. "Decide, Billy," he whispered, his voice a fragile mixture of hope and sorrow. "Will you step into the light of our destiny? Or will you let the shadows of your past bind you forever?" In that suspended moment, amid the turmoil of clashing wills and the unyielding force of fate, Billy felt the gravity of her choice like a physical weight upon her heart. With a tear-streaked face and a trembling hand still entwined with his, she finally took a deep, shuddering breath. The answer was not yet clear, and the path ahead remained shrouded in uncertainty. But in that breathtaking climax, a convergence of familial strife, inner conflict, and the inexorable pull of destiny, she realized that the decision, however agonizing, was hers alone to make. The tension in the room was palpable, a living entity of its own, as Billy's world teetered on, the brink of irrevocable transformation. Every pulse of her heart, every tear that glistened in the dim light, whispered of a future fraught with both immense beauty and unimaginable pain. And as the Alpha's silent claim hung in the air, a promise of a destiny that could not be denied, Billy stood at the precipice of a new reality, where every moment held the potential for both profound love and devastating loss. In that charged, heart-wrenching moment, the stage was set for a turning point that would ripple through every aspect of her life. The decision she faced, shrouded in the luminous interplay of fate and desire, was as monumental as it was terrifying. With the weight of the past urging her to cling to the safety of what was known, and the fierce call of destiny beckoning her toward an uncertain, wild future, Billy's heart trembled under the burden of choice. As the echoes of family conflict slowly receded, replaced by an uneasy silence that spoke of pending consequences, Billy's eyes shimmered with unshed tears and the resolute glimmer of a soul, ready to embrace its destiny. In that final, suspended breath, she stood at the threshold of a future where love, loss, and destiny converged. A future where the Alpha's claim would not be a curse, but the catalyst for a life reborn. And in that moment of breathless anticipation, the answer was poised to tip the scales, setting in motion events that would change her life and those around her forever. In the tense silence that followed the climax, the world seemed to hold its breath, suspended in a fragile moment where every heartbeat echoed with the pain of loss and the stirrings of transformation. The grand estate, once a stage for a shimmering celebration, now bore the scars of a storm unleashed, a tempest of emotions that had forever altered the lives of everyone present. Billy stood at the center of this upheaval, her eyes red-rimmed and heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. The Alpha's claim, a declaration of destiny so raw and all-encompassing, had rippled through the gathering like a shockwave. In its wake, family members and shifters alike grappled with a complex tapestry of emotions: sorrow, anger, disbelief, and a reluctant acceptance that something irrevocable had changed. The once carefully maintained facade of the wedding had crumbled, replaced by the naked truth of broken hearts and uncertain futures. For Billy, the aftermath was a relentless barrage of both physical and emotional consequences. Her body, still, trembling from the intense encounter, bore subtle yet unmistakable signs of the claiming. There were moments when a sharp, searing pain would shoot through her limbs, a reminder of the fierce, transformative energy that had coursed through her. At times, her skin would flush with an otherworldly glow, as if her very essence were being rewritten by the touch of destiny. Each pang of physical discomfort was interwoven with a deeper, more profound sensation of rebirth, an agonizing yet hopeful emergence from the depths of despair. As she moved through the estate in the hours that followed, Billy found herself confronting a series of emotional shocks. Her family, once united under the banner of tradition, now looked upon her with a mixture of pity, fear, and incredulity. Olivia's once vibrant eyes, now clouded with betrayal and disillusionment, avoided meeting hers. Even Clay, who had always been a steadfast presence in her life, wore an expression of sorrowful resignation, torn between his duty to his family and his unspoken hope for Billy's salvation. In hushed corners of the estate, whispers of what had transpired spread like wildfire. The community of shifters, who had long lived by a code of secrecy and tradition, now found their ancient laws and customs questioned by the events that had unfolded. The Alpha himself, a figure who had commanded respect and awe, now seemed burdened by an unspoken regret, a weight of responsibility that was as much about the fate of his mate as it was about his own internal torment. His eyes, once fierce with unwavering determination, now shimmered with traces of remorse and an unyielding desire to set things right. Late that night, as the storm of emotions finally began to subside into a melancholic quiet, Billy sought refuge in the solitude of an old, ivy-clad terrace overlooking the moonlit grounds. The cool night air brushed against her face, mingling with the residual heat of passion and pain. In the silence of that solitary space, she allowed herself to confront the raw aftermath of the Alpha's claim. Every sensation was magnified. The dull ache in her muscles, the persistent throb of her heart, the tears that traced silent paths down her cheeks. In that vulnerable moment, Billy began to understand that the transformation she was experiencing was both a curse and a benediction. Images of the intense encounter replayed in her mind like a haunting film. The Alpha's intense gaze, the fervent declaration of a destiny that could not be denied, the electrifying contact of his hand on hers. Each memory was a double-edged sword, carving away at her old self while simultaneously forging a new, uncertain identity. She remembered the way his voice had resonated deep within her, stirring feelings that had long been buried beneath layers of fear and heartbreak. And as she clung to these memories, a fragile hope began to sprout. A hope that, perhaps, the pain could give way to healing, and that through this transformation, she might finally learn to embrace the wild, uncharted parts of her soul. Meanwhile, within the heart of the estate, the family and the shifter community were slowly coming to terms with the dramatic shift in dynamics. Olivia, still reeling from the events, wrestled with her own feelings of inadequacy and the bitter realization that the perfect, controlled world she had clung to was irrevocably fractured. In whispered conversations over cold cups of tea, and in the furtive glances exchanged in shadowed hallways, the questions of destiny, duty, and the consequences of defiance were debated with a fervor that belied the calm exterior of the grand estate. Some saw the Alpha's actions as a necessary disruption, a challenge to the stagnant traditions that had long governed their lives, while others viewed it as a dangerous, uncontrollable force that threatened the very fabric of their existence. The Alpha, burdened by the knowledge of what had transpired, retreated to a secluded chamber draped in heavy, dark fabrics and softened by the glow of a single flickering candle. There, in the solitude of his own remorse, he contemplated the cost of claiming Billy, of intertwining their fates so irrevocably that nothing could ever remain the same. His mind churned with regret for the pain he had unwittingly inflicted, yet his heart remained resolute in its conviction that their bond, as tumultuous and fraught as it was, held the promise of redemption. He knew that the path ahead would be paved with sacrifices, and that the journey to mend the broken pieces of their souls would be arduous. Yet, in the quiet whisper of the candle's flame, there was a promise, a vow that he would do everything in his power to protect and restore the love that had just been ignited, even if it meant confronting the deepest, darkest truths of his own nature. Back on the terrace, as dawn threatened to break the night's fragile hold, Billy allowed herself a moment of introspection. The cool air mingled with the residue of her inner fire, and she began to see the transformation unfolding within her, not as an unwelcome curse, but as the painful precursor to a new beginning. The physical reminders, the slight, almost imperceptible glow on her skin, the lingering warmth of the Alpha's touch, served as symbols of a destiny that was both daunting and irresistible. With every breath, she could feel the old self dissolving, replaced by a raw, unfiltered truth that beckoned her to embrace the possibility of healing. Yet, the emotional cost was immense. The memory of the Alpha's claim, of the fervent declaration that had shattered the illusion of her former life, was a constant presence, a reminder of both what she had lost and what she might yet gain. The whispers of the night, the soft sighs of the wind through the ancient trees, carried with them the promise that this transformation, however excruciating, was the harbinger of something greater. It was a call to rise from the ashes of her past, to let the painful scars be the marks of survival rather than the tokens of defeat. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting pale hues of pink and gold upon the estate, Billy's eyes reflected a mingling of sorrow and a nascent, fragile hope. In the quiet moments before the day fully broke, she resolved to face the consequences of the Alpha's claim head-on. She knew that the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges. Her relationships with family, with the shifter community, and most importantly with herself, would never be the same again. The transformation was not merely physical. It was a deep, soul-altering metamorphosis that demanded acceptance, forgiveness, and an unwavering belief in the possibility of renewal. In the hushed solitude of that early morning, the seeds of a new future were sown. Billy realized that while the scars of her past would always remain, they no longer had to define her. Instead, they could serve as the foundation upon which she would build a life that honored both the pain of yesterday and the promise of tomorrow. With a trembling yet determined sigh, she resolved to take the first steps toward that future, future where the bond with the Alpha, though born from chaos and conflict, would become the guiding light that led her toward healing and wholeness. Inside the estate, the atmosphere was slowly shifting as well. The discordant voices had quieted to a murmur, and even those who had opposed the Alpha's actions began to see hints of the transformative potential in what had occurred. Conversations that once brimmed with anger now gave way to tentative dialogues of understanding and the search for a way forward. The shifter community, ever bound by ancient codes, found themselves at a crossroads, forced to reconsider traditions in the face of a love that defied their expectations and threatened to reshape their collective destiny. As the day unfolded, whispers of hope began to replace the earlier clamor of discontent. Family members who had been estranged by old grievances tentatively reached out, their gestures small but significant. A hand placed on a shoulder, a nod of acknowledgement, a quiet word of support. Even Olivia, with her heart heavy from betrayal and loss, seemed to glimpse the possibility that this dramatic upheaval might herald a new era for all of them. The inevitable transformation was not just confined to Billy and the Alpha. It rippled outward, touching every life in the grand, troubled family. For the Alpha, the morning light did little to ease the solemn determination that had settled in his eyes. He emerged from his secluded chamber with a quiet resolve, aware that the path to redemption would be steeped in both sacrifice and hope. His mind replayed the charged moments of the previous night, each word, each touch, and he carried within him the burden of his own imperfections and the desperate longing to heal the wounds he had inflicted. Yet, in that pain, there was also a profound understanding that the transformation of Billy and the rebirth of their shared destiny was a process that could mend even the deepest fractures of a heart. As the estate slowly stirred with the promise of a new day, Billy stepped down from the terrace, her eyes clear with newfound determination. The pain was still there, a lingering echo of a night that had changed everything. But so was hope, a hope that, through the trials and the scars, a future of wholeness and love might emerge. Every step she took toward the unfolding day was a step into the unknown, a deliberate act of courage in the face of the overwhelming tides of fate. In that charged morning light, as the world outside began to awaken to a day filled with both promise and uncertainty, Billy felt a stirring within her that was both frightening and exhilarating. It was the first tangible sign that the journey of transformation, though fraught with loss and heartache, was also a journey toward reclaiming herself, a journey where the echoes of the past would blend with the luminous promise of a new beginning. The repercussions of that fateful night would ripple through her life, reshaping her relationships, her identity, and the very fabric of the community around her. But in that moment, as the golden light of dawn touched her face, Billy resolved to embrace the changes, to let the scars of yesterday become the symbols of her strength and resilience. The Alpha's silent promise, the tentative gestures of reconciliation from her family, and the gentle murmur of nature outside all converged to herald the start of a new chapter, a chapter that would test her limits, mend her broken heart, and ultimately lead her to a destiny that was as wild, untamed, and beautiful as the forces that had brought her to this point. And so, as the estate slowly awakened to the reality of a day reborn, Billy took a deep, steadying breath and stepped forward. In that moment of transition, with the past still echoing in the corridors of her memory and the promise of a future glimmering on the horizon, she knew that her life would never be the same. The transformation was in motion, a slow, painful, and ultimately necessary evolution that would lead her into uncharted territory, where the light of hope and the shadows of sorrow danced together in a delicate, eternal embrace. Under the fading hues of a golden sunset, the world seemed to exhale a long-held sigh of relief, as if nature itself had witnessed the end of a long, painful journey. The expansive estate, once a stage for turmoil and despair, now glowed with the gentle promise of renewal. In the quiet embrace of the evening light, Billy and the Alpha, Matthew, stood side by side on a weathered stone terrace overlooking a vast valley where the last remnants of day melted into the tender blush of twilight. For years, both had been burdened by a family curse, a relentless force that had sown sorrow and loss through generations. Now, through shared hardship, raw passion, and the crucible of fate, they had learned to defy that ancient decree. Together, they had fought to reclaim not only their own destinies, but also the honor of a lineage marred by misfortune. And here, in this sacred moment of calm after the storm, they finally embraced the promise of healing. Billy's transformation was visible in every aspect of her being. The scars of her past, once etched deeply in her skin and soul, had begun to fade into gentle lines, a testament not to her defeat but to her endurance. She recalled the nights when every heartbeat pulsed with the pain of loss and the sting of betrayal. Those long, solitary hours, haunted by memories of shattered dreams and the relentless grip of a curse, had given way to mornings bathed in hope. Now, as she looked out at the horizon, her eyes shone with a quiet determination, a luminous blend of sorrow and newfound strength. Beside her, Matthew, ever the embodiment of the Alpha's fierce resolve and tender vulnerability, gazed out at the same vast expanse. His expression, once tormented by regret and the heavy burden of destiny, now softened into a quiet, hopeful serenity. the transformation within him was no less profound. The turbulent storms of his past had settled into a deep well of compassion, and his once agonized eyes now sparkled with the promise of a future reborn. In the silence between them, there was no need for words, only the shared understanding that they had emerged, scarred yet unbroken, from the crucible of their intertwined fates. Their journey toward recovery had been arduous. Days had blended into nights as they confronted the ghosts of the past, the painful echoes of family strife, and the overwhelming pressure of a legacy that had long defined them. Yet, in the tender moments of vulnerability, when Billy's tears fell like soft rain and Matthew's steady hand offered solace, their bond had grown ever stronger. Each shared sorrow had been transformed into a stepping stone toward liberation, each moment of despair into a spark of defiant hope. Together, they had returned to confront the very heart of their torment, the memories of a family fractured by tragedy and the bitter remnants of a curse that had sought to define their existence. In a series of cathartic reunions, they had gathered with those who had once been estranged, family members, once divided by bitterness and suspicion, now standing together in the quiet light of reconciliation. The halls of the estate, once echoing with the sounds of discord, now resounded with gentle laughter and soft, sincere words of forgiveness. It was as if the very walls, steeped in the history of generations, were healing along with them. In one particularly poignant scene, Billy and Matthew had led a small group of family elders to the ancient family crypt, a place where the past was preserved in silent marble and faded inscriptions. Beneath the solemn glow of candlelight, they shared stories of resilience, of ancestors who had faced unimaginable hardships, and yet had dared to dream of a brighter future. The crypt, once a somber reminder of loss, transformed into a sacred sanctuary of remembrance and hope. In that dim, hallowed space, Billy had felt a deep, almost mystical connection to every soul that had come before her. A connection that whispered, "You are not defined solely by your fate. You can also shape it." That night, as the first stars emerged in the darkening sky, Billy had sat by a small, crackling fire with Matthew, recounting every painful moment, every victory hard-won along their path to redemption. Their conversation had been both a tribute to their scars and a celebration of the healing that was possible when love transcended the boundaries of destiny. "We are more than the curses of our past," Matthew had said softly, his voice blending with the gentle pop of the firewood. "We are the architects of our future." His words, simple yet profound, had resonated deeply within Billy, igniting a flame of determination that now burned as brightly as the embers at their feet. The cinematic beauty of that night, the flickering fire, the hush of the surrounding wilderness, and the steady, reassuring rhythm of their breathing, had marked the turning point of their lives. It was in that quiet intimacy that they had reaffirmed their unbreakable bond, pledging to support each other as they navigated the uncertain yet hopeful road ahead. They had embraced the truth that while the past could never be erased, its painful lessons could serve as the foundation for a future defined by courage, resilience, and a love that was as fierce as it was tender. In the present, as the last rays of the setting sun faded into the gentle embrace of dusk, Billy and Matthew stood united, their silhouettes framed against a backdrop of swirling clouds and soft, shimmering light. The vista before them was nothing short of breathtaking, a panoramic display of nature's splendor, where the heavens met the earth in a sublime tapestry of color and emotion. It was a moment of serene clarity, a pause in the relentless march of time, where every sorrow of the past was met with the promise of renewal. As the night deepened, the estate itself began to awaken to a new era. The once troubled halls, echoing with the remnants of old grief, now resonated with the sound of gentle music and quiet laughter, a testament to the transformative power of love and the unyielding spirit of those who dared to reclaim their destiny. In the main hall, Family members who had once been at odds now gathered around a long, polished table, sharing stories and dreams, their faces illuminated by the warm glow of candlelight and hope. Billy, having embraced the healing process with a brave, open heart, felt the weight of her past slowly lift. Each day brought new challenges, but with them came small victories. A smile shared with a once distant relative, a quiet moment of understanding between old friends, the reassuring touch of Matthew's hand as they walked together under the gentle light of dawn. These moments, though fragile and fleeting, were the building blocks of a future where the scars of yesterday would become the very marks of her strength. Matthew, too, had transformed. His once tortured soul, marred by the relentless burden of a family curse, now seemed lighter, a soul that had learned to forgive, to hope, and to embrace the possibility of a love that transcended the confines of destiny. His determination to protect Billy was unwavering, and his eyes, deep and reflective, shone with a mixture of pride, regret, and an unspoken promise to never let the past dictate their future again. In a scene that seemed plucked from a timeless epic, Billy and Matthew walked together along a winding garden path at dawn. The early light cast long, gentle shadows on the dew-kissed grass, and the soft chorus of birds heralded the arrival of a new day. As they strolled side by side, their hands entwined and hearts beating in synchrony, they shared quiet words of reassurance. "We have come so far," Billy whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "And I know there will be more challenges ahead, but I believe in us." Matthew squeezed her hand gently in response, his eyes locking with hers in a moment of unspoken understanding. "Our destiny is not predetermined," he replied softly. "It is forged by the choices we make, by the love we nurture, and by the courage to face our fears." The symbolic power of that day was not lost on them. The rising sun, its golden light spilling over the horizon, served as a metaphor for their own rebirth, a new beginning where every ray of light promised healing and endless possibility. Family. Members, gathered together in the warmth of a long-awaited reunion, exchanged tentative smiles and heartfelt embraces. Even those who had once doubted the legitimacy of their union now saw, in the radiant expressions of Billy and Matthew, the undeniable truth that love had the power to heal even the deepest wounds. In the days that followed, the estate became a sanctuary of hope and resilience. Old grievances were slowly mended, replaced by the shared recognition that the pain of the past need not define the future. Billy's transformation, both physical and emotional, was celebrated as a testament to the human spirit, a spirit that, when fueled by love, could transcend any curse, any sorrow. And as the community of shifters and their human kin embraced this new chapter, there emerged a collective understanding that every soul has the power to rewrite its own destiny, to become the architect of its own future. In a quiet epilogue that felt both intimate and expansive, Billy sat by a sunlit window, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the remnants of night gave way to the promise of a brilliant new day. Beside her, Matthew's steady presence was a constant reminder of the unbreakable bond they shared, a bond that had weathered the storms of fate and emerged, triumphant, into the light of hope. The soft murmur of morning, the gentle rustle of leaves, and the distant call of a bird formed a delicate symphony of renewal that filled the room with a sense of calm and possibility. In that gentle, reflective moment, the final message of their journey echoed clearly. You are not only the product of your destiny, but you are also the master of it. The trials of the past had sculpted them into beings capable of love beyond measure, and in that love lay the power to shape their own fates. Billy's journey, marked by pain, transformation, and ultimately redemption, served as a poignant reminder that every scar, every tear, could be the catalyst for an incredible rebirth. As the day unfolded, hints of future adventures shimmered on the horizon, a promise that the world they had so painstakingly rebuilt was only the beginning. Their story, rich with passion and the triumph of the human and shifter spirit would continue to inspire and evolve. With every sunrise, with every whispered vow, and every shared smile, Billy and Matthew stepped further into a future where love reigned supreme. A future where destiny was not a chain that bound them, but a canvas on which they could paint their own epic tale. And so, in the soft light of that new day, as the echoes of their past gently faded into memory and the promise of tomorrow sparkled in every beam of sunlight, Billy and Matthew embraced the future with open hearts. Their journey had transformed them in ways they could never have imagined, and as they stood together, hand in hand, they knew that the trials they had endured had only made their bond stronger, a bond that would forever guide them through the vast, unpredictable tapestry of life. In this serene epilogue, their love was celebrated not as an ending, but as the beginning of a new saga, one filled with hope, renewal, and the unyielding belief that every heart, no matter how scarred, holds the power to shape its own destiny.